You're listening to the Piano Parent Podcast with Shelley Davis, episode 338. Hey there, and welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast. I'm Shelley Davis, a longtime piano teacher and parent with my husband of 4 mostly musical kids. As parents, we spend so much time trying to encourage and motivate our kids. We wonder if we're doing the best things for them. We second guess our decisions, and we worry if we're going to scar them for life. While you focus on encouraging your kids, I'm here to reassure and inspire you. I'll be here every week with practice tips, inspirational teacher interviews, and musical topics to help you impress your kids with your musical knowledge. Parenting is not for the faint of heart, but it's much easier with support, and you have come to the right place. Good morning, piano parents. Welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. This past weekend, I was able to go to our annual Texas Music Teachers Association conference. Every June, teachers and students and parents from across the state of Texas gather in one location, and I've only ever been to the Texas Music Teachers Conference. I have been to the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy in Chicago, but there is a national conference of music teachers. National Association hosts a conference in March of every year, and that's just not something I have been able to prioritize. And I've never been to any of the other state conferences. But what I hear from my friends who have traveled to other conferences is that the state of Texas rivals the national conference in the caliber of lecturers and presenters that come in to offer workshops to the teachers that are attending. But from what I understand, it exceeds the national conference and any of the state conferences because of the activities that they offer students and parents. In Texas, our conference, the bulk of our conference activities are on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with activities for teachers. There are sessions for local presidents. Probably one of the biggest attractions or the biggest events for students and parents are our ensemble concerts. Over the course of those 3 days, we have several concerts, and each concert hosts about 10 ensemble groups. And the ensembles can be as small as 3 or 4 students and as large as 30, maybe even 45 students playing all together. They have 15 grand pianos on a stage in the main ballroom. And so if we have a duet, we could have as many as 30 students, 2 kids per piano. Sometimes there are trios that could have 3 kids at each instrument. And it's so much fun because they're playing music together. They usually play a duet, and they get to wear costumes or t-shirts or something. They get to dress based on the music that they're playing. And some of these groups go all out with extravagant costumes. There was one group that played a song called Gypsy Dance. And so they had colorful sashes and the white poofy shirts for the girls. And they brought in tambourines that they were playing. There was another group that played a song called Bouncin' Boogie. So they were wearing fun, colorful t-shirts. And half the group came in and was playing sort of a ostinato bass rhythm, bum, 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 and so on, while the other half of the group came on bouncing these large balls, different colors. And anyway, it was just it's a very fun activity for the students to get to collaborate with each other and play some fun music. The parents get to attend and watch their kids. And then while they're at the conference, there are other student activities like an all-star festival, a digital keyboard orchestra. They get to display conference projects. It's almost like a science project on a trifold board. Anyway, I could go on and on about all the great things that I got to experience and that students get to experience at this conference. But the thing I wanted to share with you today was something that I was involved in. I'm sure you're familiar with TEDtalks, and our association offers TEXtalks, and it's a similar format where over the course of an hour-long session, our host invites 4, maybe 5 speakers to speak on a given topic, and I was invited to participate this year. And our topic was simply the sentence, "Amazing doesn't have to be hard." The theme for this year's conference was Create Amazing. So playing off of that theme, we were given the prompt, "Amazing doesn't have to be hard." And we were given no other information, no other description other than that. And it was so interesting to see how these 4 presenters interpreted that topic and formulated a presentation. The first speaker was Susan Connor. She's a very well-respected teacher in our association, a former president of the Texas Music Teachers Association, and she talked about the ABCs of amazing and working with students in her studio. And she equated A with attitude and how important it is to have a good attitude, a try it attitude, not a closed-minded, I can't do it sort of attitude. I thought that was very important. She talked about B was for boost, and not only to boost ourselves as teachers or ourselves as parents. She talked about boosting people in all areas of influence over us, whether it's our boss or someone who has influence over us. It's important to boost them. And whether it's someone, maybe a coworker or someone that we're responsible for who would work under us that might be a subordinate to us, how important it is to boost them up. If we're all working to encourage each other, then the whole atmosphere of whatever we're involved in rises. And then finally, she talked about C was having to do with creativity and communication. And so she did a great presentation, and she is a quilter, so she equated learning to quilt and feeling like she was not a great quilter, but applying those same learning examples to how she worked with her students. The second speaker was Teresa Crawford, also a former president of Texas Music Teachers Association, and she focused her presentation on how to facilitate parent-teacher conferences and how she offers annual evaluations of her piano students and gives that feedback to her parents. And she has students that remain with her for years, and she equates part of that retention to the way she communicates with her parents. And, she was speaking my language when she talks about supporting parents and encouraging them as they work with their own children. Well, that's right up my alley. So I really enjoyed Teresa Crawford's presentation. I was third, and I'm going to get to my presentation in just a little bit, but the fourth presenter was Darcy Radcliffe. I had never met Darcy before, but she is a teacher. She was out of Abilene, but over this summer she is moving to Lubbock to start a similar program in the Lubbock Independent School District. She teaches violin and orchestra and was able to take a declining orchestra program in her former school and revitalize it. She called it Revolution Strings, and they have had the opportunity to perform around the world at Carnegie Hall, at the Grand Ole Opry, and lots of opportunities. And she was talking about that these students are average school students, but by working together and the encouragement that she gave them, they went from almost having to be urged to open their cases and take their instruments out, to now they don't have to open their instrument cases because their instruments are always out. They're always practicing because they know how important that is and how fun it is to make music with their friends. And she shared a video that they produced during the pandemic when they had to be careful and use green screens and do individual recording sessions. And I'll share that, if I can find it, I'll share that in the show notes for you. But she's doing some amazing things with these students, and she shared a little bit of the process of that. My story went in a little bit of a different direction. I really didn't talk about piano lessons specifically. My original thought was this is close to time when graduations occur, and I feel like a lot of people pressure students to say, oh, you're going to do amazing things. And I feel like that seems to be such a grand, big deal that we put a lot of pressure on kids to do these big, amazing things. And my point of view is that amazing is often in the little everyday normal things. And so I thought I would share with you today the exact same story that I shared in the session. If I had been brave enough to try to record it and feel comfortable with the technology, I would have recorded my session live, but I did take notes, and so I'll just give you a fresh version of the story that I shared, titled Amazing Doesn't Have to Be Hard. It's Wednesday morning, November 6th, 2002. I'm driving my 5-year-old son, Austin, back to school after already making the 10-mile trip once today. He and his older sister, Carrie, were supposed to go on a field trip with their school, and though they're both wearing the required uniform of red shirt and blue bottoms, neither of them were wearing the correct style of blue bottoms. They were supposed to be wearing long zip-up pants with belt loops, but Carrie's pants are more like leggings, and Austin is flat out wearing shorts. Did I mention it's November? On top of that, neither of them are wearing the private school required brown braided belt. Oh, amazing. After dropping Carrie off and learning of our wardrobe faux pas, Austin and I went back home. My intention was to get him changed, grab those brown braided belts, and rush him back to school in time for his field trip. But when we got home, I lost it. There was not a clean uniform in the house. The kids had dirty clothes all over their bedroom floors. I had felt bad for Carrie earlier because she couldn't find any socks to wear. But when I opened her dresser drawer looking for that brown braided belt, I discovered tons of dirty socks where clean ones ought to be. I was so angry and frustrated. This episode affirmed that I was not at all prepared to have another baby in less than 2 weeks. Yes, you heard that right. On November 6th, 2002, while driving my 5-year-old son back to school for the second time that day, I was 8 months pregnant and feeling extremely overwhelmed by how unprepared I was to bring our 4th child into the world. Somehow, our oldest son, Justin, escaped the wardrobe fiasco. Either he accidentally wore a uniform that would pass muster, or his class wasn't going on this particular field trip. My husband and I had learned earlier in the spring that a new baby was on the way. I took my pregnancy test on April Fool's Day, but this was no joke. Amazing. By the time July rolled around, we had gotten over the shock and were starting to wrap our minds around being the parents of 4 children. They were going to outnumber us 2 to 1. It was about this time that we were hit with terrible news. Our baby had a serious heart condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Essentially, the left side of her heart, the main pumping chamber, was not developing. Without surgical interference, she would only live a few short days. As long as I was carrying her, she was fine. My heart was pumping for both of us. But each passing day brought us closer to her birth and the fear of her uncertain future. As soon as we learned of Tracy's heart condition, we began seeing specialist after specialist. One appointment was a consultation with a surgeon who would operate on Tracy's walnut-sized heart at the ripe old age of 3 days. I was nervous about meeting Dr. Hisashi Nakaido. Not only was I worried about a possible language barrier, but I was afraid I wouldn't be able to understand all the medical jargon. One of the first things I noticed about Dr. Nikaido was his tiny, delicate hands. The second thing I noticed was the cross emblem on his wedding ring. Through our conversation with him that day, we learned that our surgeon lives by the same faith-based belief system that we do. Amazing. Not only did Dr. Nikaido carefully explain the problem with Tracy's heart and how he would go about repairing it in terms we could understand, he also took the time to draw a before and after picture of how her heart would function. The details in his drawing were astonishing. It reminded me of something you might see in a Dr. Seuss book. It was so reassuring that this extremely busy man took the time to meet with us and help us understand and even visualize what was going to happen with our daughter. I believe that big things, like open heart surgery on a tiny infant, are sometimes easier to deal with than the little things like dirty socks and missing brown braided belts. The big things are often out of our control, so it's the little things that pile up and overwhelm us. When I was driving Austin back to school that day, I cried harder than I had allowed myself to cry in weeks. My frustration over messy rooms and dirty school uniforms gave way to thoughts and fears about the future. My mind was going crazy worrying about all the details. I've never been induced before. Is this going to take all day? Will it be more painful than my other deliveries? Our parents are coming in from out of town. Will they be able to stay at the hospital all day? Should we take the older kids out of school? What do I pack? I need to finish all those big sewing plans I have for the baby. I definitely need to get my house in order. Laundry, dishes, chores, apparently more laundry. My mother-in-law is going to stay at this house while we're gone. What is she going to think? I need to make sure all the bills are paid. Who knows how long we're going to stay in the hospital? Which baby book do I want? Will I even need a baby book? Poor Austin was a captive audience. I'm sure he was relieved when we finally got back to school so he could get away from me for a while. That evening, I decided to go to our church's Wednesday night Bible study. I enjoy going to Bible study, but this night might have been a convenient excuse to distract myself from all those details I was fretting about earlier. As soon as I got out of my car, Sylvia made her way across the parking lot to me. Sylvia and I were friendly with each other, but I wouldn't exactly say we were friends. We just hadn't gotten to know each other very well. So I can imagine she must have been more than a little hesitant to share what was on her mind. She had no idea how I would react. Sylvia said, "Shelley, you may think this is crazy, but I feel like God is telling me I need to come clean your house." Are you kidding me? The very day that I lost my cool over dirty clothes and a messy house. The day I was so overwhelmed I could hardly see straight. That is the exact day my church friend Sylvia made the bold offering of cleaning my house. She may have been worried that I would be offended, especially when I grabbed her by the shoulders and burst into tears. We were both crying when I shared with her the day I had had, and how relieved I was to know there was help on the way. Her gesture gave me peace of mind and calmed my fears. She related to me as one mom to another, and it was amazing. This was pregnancy hormones on overdrive. I went from overwhelming despair to overwhelming relief in a span of less than 12 hours. You may be thinking, "Shelley, this is a music conference, not a medical convention," and you're right. From my perspective, amazing doesn't always show up in the most perfect conditions. No, amazing doesn't have to be hard, but it can be HARD. Sometimes amazing is in the humble conversation between a seasoned professional and an uninformed novice. Dr. Nikaido humbled himself to help us understand. We, as music teachers, do the same for our students. Sometimes amazing is having awareness of the other person's fear and weakness. Dr. Nikaido was keenly aware and sympathetic to us. Tracy wasn't just another heart patient to him. He knew that he needed to reassure us, her parents, so that we could all be on the same team to give Tracy everything she would need. We also can be sympathetic to nervous parents who are worried about their kids for one reason or another. We don't dismiss their concerns. We address them and offer guidance to both our students and their parents. Sometimes amazing is simply relating to another person on a visceral level. Like one mom to another, Sylvia related to me in a very personal way. I would have never told her or anyone else about the morning I had had, or the morning I gave Austin. I would have never dreamed of asking for the kind of help she offered. She just knew what would be meaningful to her if she were in the same situation. We have the opportunity to relate to our students in a similar way. We know what it feels like to flop a piano audition. We've dealt with performance anxiety and memory glitches. Our students may not always vocalize what they're thinking, what they're needing, but we can still help them because we can relate to them. Sometimes amazing doesn't show up in an awesome performance or a grand musical experience. Sometimes amazing gets down and dirty, with its sleeves rolled up, ready to appear in the everyday, mundane little things. Thank you. And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging around all the way to the end. If you haven't done so already, this would be a great time for you to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast player is, hit subscribe so you will be the first to receive next week's episode. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, and you could just email me, Shelley@pianoparentpodcast.com.